questions and answers, hopefully. But before we get into all that, I'd like to always thank our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Convention. We always mention them as they treat us very, very well. And we had a great con this past fall. Actually, just a few weeks ago, right? I didn't get to go, but I heard from everything I heard it was fantastic. And I'd also like to mention we are promoting our Silverline Christmas special. And, sometimes you just, instead of talking about it, you have to run the special ad.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! It's Santa Claus, and I'm here to tell you about some Silverline crowdfunding stuff. You know Silverline. They're the comic book company that's an independent, genre-spanning, you know Silverline! They're getting ready to do one of my favorites. It's a Christmas special. Ho, 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 ho! You're going to see some of your classic old favorites of Silverline that you like Bear, and Cat and Mouse, and Divinity, and Demon's Tales, and Kalis, and Rochelle, and Teen Beetle, and Trunks, and Twilight Grim. But you're also going to see some new titles. You'll be introduced to them for the first time. Cake Town, Night Rise, Obsoletes, Satin's Ways, White Devil, and Wolf Hunter. That's right, all those are new to you. New to me too. I'm so ready for them. Christmas is my favorite time of year. Oh. You're going to see some of your favorite Silverline creators like Del Barris, Aiden Belcher, Mike Belcher, Mickey Clausen, Peter Clinton, Roberta Conroy, Brian Dale, Rob Davis, Thomas Floramonte, Thomas Hedgeland, Aaron Humphreys, R.A. Jones, Barb Kalberg, Jeremy Kahn, Brent T. Larson, Roland Mann, Haley Martin, John Medic, and Jackson Rennick. Ho, 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 ho! But you know what? There's also a bunch of new names for you Silverline fans. That's right. People like Dante Berry, Quinn Bedwell, Jim Diaglue, J.W. Franklin, Ron Fortier, you know his name, Jose Fuentes, Cassisi Harris, Richard June, Les Loker, Henry Martinez, and Tim TK. That's right. It's gonna be grand. It's gonna be big. Oh, ho, 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 ho. So make sure you pledge to the Silverline Christmas special now. It'll get to you in time for Christmas. It'll look good wrapped up under your tree or in your Christmas stocking. Ho, ho, ho! Make mine Silverline! Wait, that was supposed to be Merry Christmas.
You know, that's never going to get old. And it lasts for...
I know.
Right?
Oh,
that was almost traumatizing.
A little traumatizing.
Yeah, it was a little traumatizing.
And the pillow stuffed underneath there.
I know, it's fun. Okay, I want to welcome Barb J. Kalberg, Jeremy Kahn, John Martin, Aaron Humphreys to the room tonight. And we're just going to dive right into it because I can tell it's going to be an epic episode of Wednesday Wham. We're here to talk about reimagining enduring franchises and the somewhat arguable successes and failures of doing so. Is it necessary to change as much as some franchises have been changed? What are the values of keeping parts of the successful formula that work? Should they be abandoned? Should we completely reinvent enduring franchises? What are we going to get into here? Let's start with Ghostbusters. I'm just going to go way out from left field because we all know there was a reboot a few years back. Was it 2016, Jeremy? You're my Ghostbusters encyclopedia. Okay.
Yeah.
And basically it was not well received. And Jeremy, give us your opinion. Why do you think the Ghostbusters movie from 2016 was not as well received as it may have been?
I think a lot of these reboots are doing, when especially change the cast and stuff like that, is that a lot of them are just trying to get by on brand recognition. You'll have movies and stuff that actually are decent when you watch it. Just we watch in the context of, yeah, this is another Ghostbusters movie. Okay, well, we're going to compare it to the old one. It's kind of hard not to make a comparison, and just draw similarities when it's literally named, Ghostbusters, similar as a previous entry in the franchise. People know that name; they know what to expect. If they named it whatever, something else completely, I have a feeling it would not have done as bad as it did. Similar to that the Chucky movie that had Mark Hamill playing the character. It was a decent movie. Problem is, they named it Chucky from Child's Play. So people going into it with the preconception of what to expect, and it doesn't mesh with what they know from the franchise. It's this thing where they insist on just keeping the aspects, basically keeping the name for brand recognition. Like another one, I, Robot. When they did that one, that was not a good movie. Not a good movie in relation to how Asimov would write the stories. Was it decent on its own? Yes. But calling it I, Robot, you have that established recognition that people are expecting.
In other words, the misleading promotion and marketing that presents the product as one thing, and then we find out, hey, the interior of the book doesn't match the cover.
Exactly.
And falls below expectations. I mean, this has happened many, many times. I mean, we can go on and on. The Starsky and Hutch movie, come on, But I mean, do we really need that? But sticking to more to the genre material, have you seen Afterlife?
Yes.
Okay. So without giving any spoilers to those watching and to the rest of us, does it do a better job of living up to what we expect after Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2?
Yes. One thing I was happy with was the fact that it did acknowledge the previous movies, but you don't have to see them to enjoy it. And it does actually, trying to not spoil it, but it borrows a lot from the mythos set up in the first movie. Second movie, they kind of ignore, really. But if you'll see a lot of mythos, a lot of, the breadcrumbs that are leaving the first movie coming into play in this one. So there is a connection to the two, even though it is a completely different type of movie.
No, yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard that they have appearances by like 90% of the original cast, which is a huge draw for me. And it looks I've seen it in previews from going to movies, and it looks fun.
They say they killed at New York Comic Con.
Yes,
it was very fun to watch here with everyone there.
I'll bet it was. So if we were to apply what we've learned from just discussing briefly what we have without spoilers, I would say, if you're going to create something that's part of an enduring franchise like Ghostbusters, it's important not to alter the original formula too much. And from what I understand from the preview, we do continue the story of the family of some of the original characters, but we don't, from what I'm hearing, they don't radically change or alter just for the sake of radically changing and altering.
Correct.
Okay. That's
Keep
good.
the flavor of the original.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I skipped the other Ghostbuster movie completely. I saw previews of it and like, it's not doing it for me. So I didn't even watch it. But this one, I'm actually really looking forward to. It looks so fun.
Yeah, it really does.
Honestly, 2016 seemed more like a parody of a Ghostbusters movie than anything else. But again, if you go into it, not the mindset, this is a Ghostbusters movie, you might enjoy it then. Just going in that preconception is what kind of ruins it for some people, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. With the James Bond franchise, I talked to a lot of people who are lifelong fans. It's been around for 50 plus years now. And
I've seen all of them.
Yeah, I have too. And
scratch.
I remember, every time there's a new Bond, or every time there's a big change in the continuity or something dramatic, there's this outrage. And sometimes it's justified, sometimes it's not. Personally, I like to keep an open mind until I actually see the film. So I saw a lot of negative press about it, and I sort of tried to keep that at bay and said, look, I'm just going to see. I'm going to give it a chance to see what happens. I was pleasantly surprised. The only thing I would warn fans who love the series as a comprehensive series spanning 5 decades, I would say you've got to go into this film if you really want to absorb it the way it should be taken. My suggestion would be this is chapter 5 of the Daniel Craig verse of Bond. This doesn't really so much fit in with all the other films. So what they've done here, what the producers have done, because they had different directors, they've kind of done what Chris Nolan did with his Batman trilogy. They've created the Daniel Craig universe for 5 movies, and arguably there's some really fantastic material there. And I think ultimately it turns out to be one of the better films, and a wonderful film for him to walk out on. What did you guys think? I'd love to hear y'all's opinion on this one.
Well, I just saw it today.
Okay.
It's fresh in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that it featured Spectre. We got to have Spectre.
Yeah.
And world-ending possibilities, and heroics, and lots of fast-paced getaways, and pulled off miracles and stuff like that. So in that sense, it hit all the Bond spots, highlights.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. It was a 3-hour movie. Just so you guys are aware, it's 3 hours. We were going to see it yesterday, and then I realized that, oh my God, it's 3 hours. It's going to run into an appointment that I got to take my mom to. So we had to reschedule it for today. But it went by really fast. I mean, it was kept you on the edge of your seat for the entire 3 hours.
Yeah.
And that's a good sign.
That's a real good sign. Jeremy, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it was fun because I actually went with my grandfather to see it. And so he obviously was around growing up when these movies were first coming out. And he really enjoyed it. I was thinking he was let down at the end, not because I thought it was bad, just because having grown up with the character, suddenly seeing that happen.
Yeah.
He's like in his 90s, so it's probably the last one he's going to see. So.
Right. Well, I felt a little bit of that nostalgia as well, but Daniel does such a good job embodying the character, and the performances were good. As you and I were discussing in the messenger earlier, the soundtracks, it really does justice to the material as well. The set pieces, the exotic locations, action sequences, the editing, everything is spot on, and they pulled out all the stops. So even the sort of passing the torch of the rank of 007 for a moment or two, for a few minutes in the film. And then, even that was done with class. I think everything was done with class. So what I would say I learned from this one is more, they didn't really stick to the formula of a Bond movie. This is more of a personal spy thriller family drama than it is a spy movie. It has those elements in it, of course. But I would say, they hit on every note that they should have for a Bond fan. And the epic event that occurs at the end, it shakes you up a bit, but it's a fitting conclusion to Daniel Craig. So back to what we learned from this as creators, if you're going to mess with the formula, do it with such class and respect to the original formula that you don't alienate the fan base. So I guess respect is a key word. John, have you seen it? I can't help but
think we say that. I just keep thinking of all the people were saying when they first announced they're going to have a blonde James Bond.
Right. I remember that. I remember the resistance to Daniel was primarily for superficial reasons. And that's always going to happen. Everybody's going to go, no, it's not right, or whatever. He sold me with Casino Royale. I was like, okay, you've got it. you've embodied the character. This is fantastic. So as a Bond fan, I would say go to it and with the consideration of this film in the same context as the Chris Nolan Batman universe. It's an auteur director, but in this case, producer and stars individual universe take on this enduring franchise. But because it was done with such respect and class, I got to give it up to them for accomplishing something here. I mean, it's memorable, and usually when you remember scenes from a film long after you've seen it, that's a good sign. We'd all be so lucky to create a character with that kind of, lasting power. I mean, come on. There are very few of them. What do you, John, have you seen it? Aaron, I know Aaron hasn't. He's not really a Bond fan. John, have you seen it?
I have not.
Okay. I don't want to give anything away. Are you planning to? At some point? Cool. Okay. I would say yes. Do see it if you like Daniel Craig. This is his last one, so if you get a chance, check it out. But when we're creating, it's like stay true to the characters. In the micro creation process, what I like to try to do is make sure you don't pander to an audience unless that's your intent from the get-go. And what I mean by that is if you're creating a character, or even like Jeremy, if you're creating a character, you're coloring a character, and the colors haven't been decided yet. A lot of times people take a, shall we say, a marketing approach, and they say, okay, what do kids like today? Do they like red? Do they like yellow? Or what's the most popular color? I'll make the costume that color. Once you go down that path, forever it will dominate your destiny, to quote a Star Wars quote. But I think, again, if you start calculating like that, stay true to what you want your character to be and stick with that. And even if you have naysayers or people saying, maybe you shouldn't do this, maybe you shouldn't do that, stick to it. Barbara, you've stuck to Divinity, and again, it's an award-winning storyline, and kudos for that. When you go in to do the successive issues, are you tempted to calculate, or do you just go, you're informed by the characters? How do you go about it?
Am I tempted to mess with the formula?
Yeah, mess with the formula in terms of, should I make this more appealing to a younger audience, to the MTV crowd, to this crowd, to that crowd? Is that informing you? Is that like a little voice in your head? Or,
well, it's funny that you should mention that, because I'm a huge Supernatural fan, and I kind of follow the fan base on Tumblr, which is absolutely a hell site, and I don't recommend it to anybody. It's a cesspool, but there are very, very vocal fans on it, and there are two main camps of people on it, and there's a section of the fandom that harass the writers and even the actors and stuff like that, because they didn't like the way that the show ended, or the storylines in the last few seasons. And they thought that if they were vocal enough, they could force them to write what they wanted to see.
Okay.
And that is ridiculous. That's telling a writer, we want you to write what we want, not what you want. And it's like, but it's my story. It's my creation. If you want something else, go write your own. No, I have no intention of altering my vision for my own book just to please, a small subsection of fans, if that should ever rise.
That's good. That's good. That the integrity of the content. I know I've talked about this too with Aaron before, with writing his material, but Aaron, you've been awfully quiet. You want to chime in here?
Yeah, sorry. You guys are talking about Bond. I don't have much to say about that. So that was all.
I know. I hear you. Well, we're talking now just the creation process, and let's take, for example, the Batman trailer. I want to bring this in so I can bring you in and bring John in as well on this because I know he's a
I
Batman.
hadn't even seen that trailer yet. I'm slacking.
You are slacking, my friend. It's interesting because we have a younger actor playing Bond. We've recast, everybody, all the supporting cast, and it's almost like we're trying to reboot again. With year 2, I believe, is the context under which they're presenting.
Not a fan of Bond, the new Bond movie.
How many times has Batman been reimagined?
Rebooted, I know, right?
We're counting animation and live action because that's a good number right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, another animation coming out soon as well.
Yeah.
Are we counting Batman reboots as TV and movies, or just the movies?
That's what I was asking. You have the new Cape Crusader animated series coming out soon. It's supposed to be, I think, year 1, I think, for that one.
Well, it's only been on TV, live action TV, the once, right?
Right.
As far as I'm aware,
Yeah, action,
which
yes.
I watched the original series.
If you don't count Gotham and Pennywise.
Well, yeah, Gotham, but Batman. I mean, there was a lot of animated Batmans, but I would be interested to see a TV reboot, live action Batman, just for the hell of it. I mean, it was been in the 60s the last time we saw one.
Yeah. What do you think?
These, wherever it was, they won't allow it because they're big name characters. They won't allow to appear on television. They feel it cheapens the brand.
I've heard that too, Jeremy. I've also heard that they're afraid of brand fatigue. I think that's
really
they're
afraid of brand fatigue.
Brand fatigue,
but they'll do 400 movies of it.
Well, competing.
They have 2 Batman as the next Flash movie.
Right, competing with the other DC content that's streaming and that's on television, so on.
Because the CW,
right? Batman is like a nuke, right? So he's like Luke Skywalker, right? That's why you haven't seen much Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars material on television, because they know that if Luke is on something, it's going to suck out all the air out of the room, and everything else, all their ratings are going to drop. And
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So same thing with Batman. You put Batman on TV opposite some other DC material. That other DC material is going to be like, huh? Who? What? Batman's over here. It's like we don't care. I think
you can see that going on with the Flash, I guess, because people are comparing, the TV ones to the movie Flash a lot.
But then, look at it this way, though. What if you have a DC show on the CW that's only doing mediocre, but you use it as a lead-in to Batman? Wouldn't that be a win-win?
Yes,
I would think
so. I would think so.
I'm actually going to come in on that. Batman is not oh crap, it's Batman, because they do it with Harley as well. Okay. Everybody loves Harley.
Right.
So there's Batman, there's Harley. Who else?
In the Bat universe, or just in DC in general?
In DC in general. I guarantee you, if they were to sit there and throw out a John Stewart Green Lantern, he would be up there with those two as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're doing Superman.
They're doing Superman on TV, right?
Yeah.
Right. They're focusing a lot with that one on the family, and they're looking for a specific demographic there rather than a wide demographic. I have some friends who watch it regularly. I've watched a couple of them. They're not bad. They are aimed a little YA, a little young audience, which is totally fine. It's no big deal. I think
they still have that Green Lantern series coming out at some point for HBO Max.
I had heard that,
but I will say that Batman's not their cash cow, not just their cash cow, because they have worn Batman out.
What would you say be their main cash cow if it's not Batman?
I don't really think they have anything right now.
Well, they have movie-wise. They've got Aquaman and Wonder Woman that did very good. The first Wonder Woman did very well. Aquaman did very well.
Yeah, the second one did horribly.
Right.
Everything I heard about it was cheap. It seemed so cheap, and
it didn't help that it hit came out right as a pandemic hit.
I think but I mean, okay, even if it came out right when the pandemic hit, everything from what I've heard about that movie, it could have been done better at every aspect of it.
I heard that too. I haven't seen it. I need to sit through it, but to be honest,
you can't use it for an excuse on that movie if you didn't even freaking do it right.
I haven't been able to bring myself to sit down and spend 2 hours watching. So I couldn't tell you about Wonder Woman at this point. I hope.
Well, and as long as you've got Jason Momoa as Aquaman,
that's going to do well.
That's going to sell out.
Yes.
But right now,
even if the story's complete crap,
I think they've done pretty good with both casting and story with Aquaman. I thought they did. They kind of turned him into rock and roll underwater Thor, which is kind of cool, you know.
Right now, they have an animated trilogy on HBO Max are starting too.
What do you guys think about the upcoming Spawn reboot?
It's not really a reboot. Technically it's not a reboot because it's through the eyes of Sam and Twitch.
Okay, and from what I've heard, Todd has a huge hand in it.
Well, he's going to be directing it.
So there you go. I knew he was producing. I know they were going to let him direct it. I think
he wrote it.
He wrote it, and he's directing it.
I think we'll see his vision. You know, stand or fall, sink or swim. It will be his vision, and you know, I applaud him for that. It's this is his character, so go for it, man. You know, I've never seen Todd as someone who would pander, so I'm kind of excited for that because, you know, I always talk about the odd costume, the impossibility of it, and so on. And how cool it still kind of is because you've never seen anything quite like it. It's just bizarre.
Has he ever directed anything though?
Maybe.
No, Todd has never directed anything.
Not that I'm aware of. Certainly not a major motion picture. They might have let him direct one of the animated.
He's not. No, he hadn't even directed like a music video like Brian Pulido.
Okay. It's gonna be interesting to see how he handles it. I guarantee you, he's got assistant directors there and people who've been in the business for years to shepherd him through it. But you know, Todd broke a lot of ground, not just with comics, but with his toy manufacturing. I mean, he's one of those people who learns quickly, and hopefully he'll do well. I mean, I'm pulling for him. I hope it.
And he managed to pull DC into McFarlane Toys, which means that he's just hand over fist.
He was a director on a couple of short videos and music video. Looks like.
Oh, really?
Has he?
And he did write scripts for the animated series.
I knew he'd written some stuff for the animated. So he has some experience in production. Certainly not a film of this size. I'm sure there are a lot of producers involved. It's going to be one of those movies where there's tons of like logos at the beginning. You're like, wow, how many people pitched in for this? You know. So Aaron, you're still like totally silent over there. No voice on Spawn. No opinion on Spawn.
You're muted.
No anything. Apparently
he's muted.
He's mute.
I can't hear him.
Nope.
No, we can't hear you, boss.
We can't hear you, Aaron.
Turn it off and turn it back on.
Yeah, the standard thing they tell you, right? Reboot.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Darn, I was going to tell you
it said my mic wasn't mute. No, it said my mic wasn't mute. No, I don't know. I mean, I haven't read Spawn in years, so I don't really know. I mean, I don't mind movies. I generally just don't watch a lot of stuff. I mean, my all-time favorite movie has nothing to do with comic books.
Oh, that's cool.
It's comic book movies. I don't really get excited one way. I mean, I saw the Batman. I'm like, oh, they're making another Batman movie. Okay.
Right.
I'm sure they'll make those to the day I die.
But you like manga, and they're going to redo Akira.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is I think it's stupid to do that. But I mean, I personally don't really care because I still have the original.
Yeah.
This is what Mike Mignola said about Hellboy. It's like everybody bitched about the Hellboy. It's like, well, yeah, but you can just read the comic if you don't like the movie. I'm like, well, yeah, that's true. I think there's a lot of, and I don't know where this comes from, But people really think movies like the epitome of a property, and I've never really understood where that comes from. Like if your comic book is made into a movie, like that's the ultimate version of that story, and I just think that's ridiculous. More people spend more time debating interpretations of movies than interpretation of comics, books, games, anything else. And I've never understood why movies are supposed to be the pinnacle of your story. Like if they don't get the movie right, it ruins every other thing associated with it. And it just doesn't make any sense to me.
I can see where you're coming from on that. I think there are two reasons that inform the answer. This may not be the complete answer. Right. Number one, the most successful mythology and storytelling delivery system of the late 20th century is film. And so it's become the lexicon of the culture. So I think
it has the lowest entry bar.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
There's nothing through. I mean, you sit there and stare at it.
You just sit and stare.
You don't have to read it. Yeah.
Lowest entry bar, et cetera. Number two, there's a lot of money involved. So the commercial aspect, someone always, I mean, this getting outside of the pure artistic viewpoint, if you look at it from a commercial perspective, the money Hollywood throws at these people to buy the rights to make a movie, it makes them feel like, okay, I've arrived. They're making a movie out of my property or what have you. And I don't think any of us would turn that check down. So again, it's not the be all end all for everybody. But I think those two reasons are why people perceive it as, okay,
I think it's a way to get out to the masses. I mean, you definitely get more people interested in the property. But again, that doesn't translate them going back to the original.
99% of moviegoers don't read the comics.
Exactly. Comic book movie people don't go read the comics. So it doesn't translate back to it. But I've heard this like argument over, and it like, well, you know, well, they're gonna mess up the movie, and I'm just one of those people. I just don't care. I mean, if they mess up the movie, fine. If they don't, I don't. I mean, if it's a great movie, great. I mean, my favorite interpretation of a comic movie is Dredd. Dredd's like one of my favorite movies.
Interesting. Okay.
And it's like I really thought they nailed the character, but if that movie failed, I still have Judge Dredd the comic.
Right.
It's just I've never understood this infatuation with movies have to have the most scrutiny when it comes to storytelling and properties. I'm just like, yeah, but you're dealing with a bunch of rich executives that don't care about. They don't care about the property. They don't care. No, so they're getting the most toned down, most generic version of your story, and then people go see it. It's like, why is it so generic? Because it can appeal to the masses. They can sell more tickets, money. And then they go, well, I don't understand. Like, I always think it's so funny. People are like, well, we should hold movies to a higher standard. Yeah, but you got to look where it's coming from. These people don't care about the integrity of the art or the story. They just want to make as much money. I mean, majority of most content is written to an 8th grade level comprehension. I mean, I'm 46. I really find that kind of insulting that everything's written to an 8th grade level. I'm like, can we write anything for a higher audience?
No, actually, there's more actual, I guess you could call them $10 words in comics than there is in any other form.
Right.
Books and everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, comics are not written to an 8th grade level.
No, I'm saying movies are. Most
movies. He was saying movies
like
are.
Movies, most media. Because of the idea of like anyone can interpret it. That's why every time you see like really complex ideas in comics, they're really toned down, dumbed, or stripped out of the movie because they want to appeal to the most audience. Right. And I'm just like, well, then that just kind of defeats the purpose of a lot of stuff. I mean, the new Batman movie looks cool to me. I mean, I thought the car was cool. I thought he was cool. I thought the fact that it's a detective. I'm sure this iteration is going to be just as cool as all the other iterations of Batman. I mean, I don't see it as a reboot because I just think it's like a comic book series. It's like this guy's interpretation of his property. So I don't necessarily see comic book movies as reboots of like the Spider-Man movies. Like, well, yeah, those are just all directors' different take on Spider-Man. Like Heavy Artist has done a different take on Spider-Man over the years. You know, I think what John Byrne did one, maybe it was Superman. You know, but I mean, there's been many years of people doing interpretation of Spider-Man. I just think the movies are the same concept. So
let's drill down on it though.
Yeah.
What makes a good interpretation and what makes an unsuccessful interpretation and why? So I'll give you one that's in your wheelhouse. Let's say Ghost in the Shell, right?
Yeah.
The anime versus the ScarJo movie a few years ago.
Yeah, I saw them both. I mean, the comic book it was based on was much more intricate about going in. He really went into the idea of what it means to be a cyber self, or the idea. I mean, the original movie was the idea: could life arise out of information alone? I mean, in other words, if you develop the idea of information, because something becomes self-aware, and when it becomes self-aware, like self-identifying, could it become a lie? But of course, you can't really replicate. I mean, you can clone yourself, but you can't really replicate. That's what the end of the first movie was the idea he needed the major to, in other words, to introduce that genetic variety to produce life. Because cloning yourself is pointless. You have to do that genetic variety. And so that was what that was about. And the second one, the movie kind of interpreted that a little bit. She was the girl Kusanagi.
Mm-hmm.
Then she was the Scarlett Johansson character, so they kind of mixed the two. They kind of still hit on the same concept. She's by the end of the movie, she's a new entity. She's not, she's the major. She's these two versions, these two people mixed. I'm like, okay, that's kind of a different interpretation. But I can see that.
Yeah.
If they did the straight adaptation of the comic or whatever, it would be a niche movie for sure. Not many people are very knowledgeable about in-depth knowledge about that stuff.
Right.
So I think would just people be like, oh, it's a niche sci-fi movie. Most sci-fi movies are toned down, taking a lot of the science out of it to give you the general idea. So
what you would say is commercially, you would have to sacrifice commercial success to maintain the integrity of the original content of the idea.
Well, look at the Matrix films are classic examples of this.
Yes.
The first Matrix film is considered the best one.
Right.
And they say, and there's been rumors that the sequels to the Matrix films were written after the fact or whatever, but they're not. If you watch the first one, there are hints of the sequels in the first one. You just have to be wary of them. They were all written as one. The first one was good because it was good versus evil. Americans know that. Good versus evil. Bad guy. Right. We get that. Then they started to dissect that, break that down. No one's really good, gray areas. Americans don't like that. They're very much, we like, he's bad, he's good, they fight.
Right.
And so when you start questioning that stuff, breaking it down, people are like, oh, I don't want to do that. Especially when you get to the architect lecture, which is my favorite lecture. People are like, I didn't understand anything he said. I totally understood everything he said. They didn't.
But you're a philosophy major, right?
So. Yeah, I am a philosophy minor, but pretty much mostly a major. But instead of them going out and researching it or being interested in it, they're like, I don't get it. I don't care. So the movies let me down. Not that this movie is challenging me to go find out something more, discover something more. This movie has let me down because I don't understand it. Therefore, it's stupid, which is always my favorite interpretation of all people who consume media. If I don't understand, it doesn't live up to my expectations, then it's stupid. And I'm not going to go try to learn anything about what they're talking about. Because there's a ton of stuff they can talk about. I mean, they actually tried to introduce philosophy to the American people. And it's like, no.
Well, arguably, you could say part of it was the content. Maybe part of it was the delivery. Because I'll give you an example. As a kid, I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey, which fantastic journey into Kubrick's interpretation of the novel, which I read by Arthur Clarke. And that's another deep and sort of in the weeds, heady philosophical discussion as a visual journey as well. And I remember the fun of that was debating on, well, what does the end of 2001 actually mean? What is the Star Child? What is he? What are they doing? What actually happened? Now, the ambiguity of that is arguably why the film is considered a sci-fi classic. So I don't know, was the audience a little bit more well-read in those days? I mean, if you release 2001 now, would people still think it's the greatest,
Well, it didn't do that good upon release to begin with.
Yeah. I think it had...
also another one that didn't do good, but now has a cult following.
Yeah. Exactly. I think it's more of a attention span. I know this sounds, I mean, they've done studies. This is the MTV generation. Attention spans have gotten less and less and less. Right. So to most people, I guess I used America because I live in America. The attention spans goes, if they don't get it in the first few seconds, they lose interest, they wander off.
Well, you came away from 2001 Space Odyssey very contemplative.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you were to release that movie now, would it be successful? No, not as much.
I think questions and
I mean, because if you look at it, the movie Interstellar, which was a direct homage to 2001.
It was very existential for one thing.
Yeah.
2001.
It didn't do well. Most people don't remember. It did okay.
Really did not like Interstellar.
Interstellar. I mean, regardless of whether or not you liked the story or not, it did stretch that, and most people just didn't. It was okay. Christopher Nolan's most famous movies are his Batman movies. People get that. Batman got it. Beats up bad guys. Got it. Do something like Interstellar or something.
Well, Inception is another example.
Exception is. I have my own problems with Inception. People really liked Inception.
I don't get that because Inception is very straightforward. It's literally a point A to point B storyline.
Yeah.
I don't understand why people say it's more complex, more deep. It's very easy to keep track of what's going on in that movie. It really is.
Yeah. There was not. I tried to watch Tenet. I think Tenet is to a point where I think he's sacrificing story for his exposition. And so I can kind of understand that. It just didn't grab me or whatever. Right. I it's funny. So Tommy did ask me. So
what do you say?
What is your favorite movie? Okay, so my favorite movie is a movie called Never Cry Wolf from 1982, I think.
Okay. Tell us about it, because this is really interesting. What in the world? I don't.
Never heard. Okay, so Never Cry Wolf is. Let me look up. I think it's 82. Could be 83. It was a Walt Disney movie.
Okay.
Never Cry Wolf is about. I'm gonna try to. It's about a guy that goes up and studies. It was loosely based on the life of a guy named Wyatt Marley, I think, isn't it? Farley Morat. Sorry, and it was a movie. 83. Okay, it's 1983. And this is a guy who goes up and studies wolves. He was one of these guys that would study. It did a lot of studies of the habits and behaviors of wolves.
Got it.
The story is loosely based on. It's about a scientist who goes up to study the wolves in the Arctic. It is reported that there's a decline in the caribou herds, and they're attributing it to the wolves. So his mission is to go up, dispatch a wolf, study the contents of his stomach and determine whether or not the scientific theory proposition is true. But when he gets up there, there's more of a spiritual connection with what he goes through. You'd have to kind of see the movie itself. It's kind of hard to find. I do have it on DVD and never put it on anyone else. It does show male nudity. This is why Disney has backed away from it.
Oh. Okay.
It's filmed in British Columbia. The cinematography is unbelievable. But it's about this guy who kind of goes on a spiritual journey because he starts studying these wolves and starts beginning connecting to them. And it's kind of more of a natural man versus nature sort of thing. He also, the guy did the cinematography, also did one for the movie called The Black Stallion, which is
seen that.
Yeah. Same cinematographer. Yeah, same cinematographer. If you can hunt the movie down, if you can find it, you're not going to find it on Disney.
It's a very intellectual film.
Kind of not. Kind of not. You have to see it. Not really. You'd have to see it. It's most people have seen it, love it. The soundtrack is amazing or whatever. It's not an intellectual film per se. It's more of a personal journey. Personal journey with this guy kind of goes through studying this, kind of like the idea of reconnecting back with nature and the world through his time up there in kind of isolation. It's beautiful. It's not depressing. Movie. Not I don't think it is. But it's an older movie. It's been my absolute nothing's been able to top this movie and beat it. Like I said, most people can't find it. So
what did you think? This is just a side note because this movie is another one of those contemplative ethics that sticks with you. What do you think of Apocalypse Now?
I saw that once, and I remember liking it. Sometimes war movies can take or miss. Probably my favorite war series is Band of Brothers. As far as that series, I need to go watch Apocalypse Now.
Watch Apocalypse Now because it is an indirect adaptation of the dark. What is it? Heart of Darkness. Sorry,
the Heart of Darkness.
Heart of Darkness. Yeah. So what you have is a journey into really the understanding of the fog of war and life and death, and it's just done against the backdrop of Vietnam and the confusion of that war in terms of.
See, my image of that is flavored because I I read Martin Sheen's biography, and he talks a lot about it. So anytime I see that now, I can see scenes from that book from behind the scenes. Oh, I
need to watch it again. Yeah.
The making of is almost as fantastic as the movie itself, because it was done in a time where experimental movies were more the order of the day rather than calculated blockbusters. They basically, Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Sheen and Marlon Brando and all these guys go to the Philippines and start shooting this war epic. And it's one of those things where the script is constantly evolving. They're getting monsoons.
Yeah, I've heard that the production took forever, and there's
Marlon Brando was so huge they didn't expect him to be as big as he was when he came in, so they had to do him in shadow.
Yeah, I mean all this crazy stuff, and then they shot 3 endings, and you've got the whole film again. I bring it up because you sort of tweaked the philosophical point tonight, but it's got a lot of philosophy in it about, you know, the journey into darkness, you know, and what it does to this all-American colonel who's a hero, a Green Beret, and he goes native, so to speak, and sets himself up as this godlike being in the jungle. And basically Martin Sheen is hired to go take him out. And it's
I remember that. He kind of goes, I remember the story, he goes rogue or native, and he's sent in to basically take this guy down.
Yeah, and he can't admit that that's what it's an assassination of a friendly who's gone native. And so it kind of messes with Martin Sheen's character too, because once he meets the Marlon Brando character, he admires the intellectualism, but he's repulsed by the brutality of him, you know, because he's kind of gone complete Nietzsche, you know, not nihilistic. It just completely
nothing means anything.
What's the point of anything, you know? And all that matters is, you know, force and brutal violence, and life is meaningless, so who cares? And so it goes into that. And so, but the film itself draws you down the river with Martin Sheen. So you go through this journey from civilization into this dark psychedelic place.
Yeah, I'd like to see. It should be. I think it's streaming. I've watched it years ago. Like I actually finally watched Deer Hunter, a while ago.
Yeah, that's a similar. That's sort of in that same wheelhouse. Yeah.
Just going the idea of like, you know, are there any, you know, technically any winners of war? I mean,
right.
Yes, and
the horrors of what happens and addressing that. But that's an amazing film. But I only brought that up because you brought up Never Cry Wolf. And I was like, man, he'll like this. If he watches it again, he'll really like. Kubrick was one of those people, and this brings us all back full circle to what we're talking about with imagining and reimagining, and that is Kubrick took The Shining, for example, and he made his movie. Now, Stephen King didn't like it when it came out.
Yeah, he completely disowned it. Yeah.
The critics loved it, and audiences loved it. And arguably because what Kubrick did was he discarded the decorations of the Christmas tree, metaphorically, and he took the Christmas tree itself, and he said, I'm going to do a film about the disintegration of a human being in isolation who is already an alcoholic and has, you know, problems relating to his family. And I'm going to make it a little bit ambiguous as to the supernatural influences on this individual. And then brilliantly, I'm going to cast, you know, Jack Nicholson into his career making, you know.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So what you have there is that perfect storm, but it informs our reimagining discussion because he's reimagining a novel, right, as a visual story. But arguably, he stayed true to the formula that works in the novel, which is, again, emotional, psychological disintegration, whether it's caused by true supernatural or his interpretation of supernatural is left partially ambiguous. It's ultimately a supernatural, you know, horror story. But it's interesting though. Did you find that a successful movie?
I did like this. I did like it. Stephen King's a hit or miss me. I like some of Stephen King's stuff. Some of it is a little too. I think when he's at his best, I think he's good. I think there's been a lot of stories where he had to write something. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, sure.
And I do think it's funny that he's actually admitted that. I think Cujo was one. He doesn't remember writing Cujo. He was so high on drugs, like I don't remember writing that. And yeah, he's openly admitted that. It's like because he's done a lot of drugs in his time. But yeah, I do think when Stephen King's on his game, I think he can be good. The one that never really connected with me, and I wish it did more, is The Stand. It was okay, but I like The Shining, the movie The Shining, but the Stand never really. I tried, and
the novel is a little bit long.
It is, yeah.
What he tried to do there, from the material I've read on it, is he tried to create an all-American Lord of the Rings, which arguably succeeded or failed based on your opinion of the novel. Very similar to with Salem's Lot, he tried to create an all-American suburban Dracula, which again, arguably.
Speaking of which, did you see that they're going to make Nosferatu?
Oh, nice!
Yeah,
very
nice.
Be interesting. There's a classic for you.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard of the particular director. Apparently, he's kind of a niche art film type of director, but. Robert Eggers?
Yes. This is the gentleman who's part, if I recall correctly, he's part of A24. They did The Witch, and then they also did Hereditary, and they also did Midsummer. And those are psychologically assaulting horror films for anybody who's into
he's remaking the original Nosferatu.
Very nice.
Yeah, I'm glad that I like his movies. I liked Hereditary, like Midsummer. I did notice this seems to be the same theme of like this sort of ritual that's taking place. So I'm like, he needs to get like, okay, after the second movie, you need to get a new shtick. Like I said,
template. Yeah.
It's like he's got a ritual, and then it comes true. I'm like, okay,
and then things go bad.
Yeah, I like Hereditary. I think a little more. Midsummer, I kept watching that movie, and I'm like, dude, you're surrounded by trees. I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, just run. I remember one lady, and she goes running to the car, and the car doesn't start. What do I do? And I'm like, the woods. To the woods, man. What do you mean? Like, what do I do? Just start running. What? I'm like, so there were some really moments in there where I'm just like, when the people get killed, I'm like, you deserve it. I mean, I don't know what to say.
Here I got you'll love this. This segues from what your discussion. Okay, so the new Halloween material. We're in that season, right? I don't know if you saw the originals, Halloween and Halloween.
Unfortunately, I've never seen any Halloween, and I've been meaning to. I watched the making of Halloween the other night, and I actually really want to see. I don't know how these slipped by me. I love John Carpenter.
I think you'll love it because it's John Carpenter's big breakout, and it really, he tapped into something very basic there, which is why the film did well and became the grandfather of all slasher films. Is he thought, wait a second, on Halloween night, everyone's dressed up and anything goes, no matter how scary you look. What if a serial killer picked up on that, right? So he takes that basic idea and runs with it, and then makes the serial killer indestructible without an explanation, which is kind of cool because, again, he's throwing ambiguity in there, and you're like, okay, this is kind of cool. So the first film does gangbusters. The second movie is not as great, but it picks up right after the first one ended, so it's kind of a cool play on. Succession.
Did John Carpenter do the sequels? Do you know?
He produced, and he and Deborah Hill, I think, made a lot of money off the sequels. But they were arguably not as well received. And this last one that came out in 2018, which they really kind of ignore all the sequels from the 80s and 90s, and they go back to the original 1978, and they sort of pick up and say, okay, Jamie Lee Curtis's character is in her 50s now, and she's haunted by what happened to her, and she's become this sort of prepper that's ready for Michael to be released from prison. He gets out, and he terrorizes her and her granddaughter and her daughter, and it's really kind of, I was impressed. But again, reimagining was so cool here, because here's what they did. They took a lot of the conventions of today's society and placed them in the film. So you've got the intellectualizing journalists, right, who just want to understand the villain and why he kills people. And then you've got the obsessed psychiatrist who's made it his life's mission to understand this killer and why he does what he does.
And how old is he at this point?
Do what?
And how old is Michael at this point?
Well, Michael would be like 60. at least at this
Yeah.
point, if not older.
If it's the same guy, I mean, it always seemed like. Did they ever say it's the same guy or somebody?
Yeah, it is the same guy. Here's what's cool: the Reimagining, the latest one, not the one in theaters now, but the 2018 one, which this one supposedly picks up from. They kept the ambiguity of this guy has some sort of inhuman power in that you can shoot him, you can stab him, you can burn him up, and he keeps getting up and coming back. And I assume that at some point in these sequels, they might address that a little bit. They keep hinting at it, but a lot of it, they tease the fact of what the pagan ritual, or the pagan ritual and ceremony of Halloween really is about. So if you do your research on that, you kind of understand what Halloween really is in the traditional pagan sense of what it is, and you sort of go, he's sort of the embodiment of the dark pagan god that rises at Halloween, etc. Maybe
I actually like the fact that they were keeping it ambiguous.
This makes me kind of go, which pagan's pretty broad, so you have to probably
in terms of where Halloween came from, the All Hallows Eve sort of celebration of the nature worship and that sort of idea. And where there was a pantheon,
the Wicca.
Yes, that more in that realm, but they never really directly explain anything. They just tease that concept in the film. But what I thought was great was, the people, like you were saying earlier, the people who die at the hands of Mike Myers, right? You're like, well, you know what? You deserve it. You did this and you did that, and and so you kind of laugh at it. So it kind of takes a little bit of the horror out of it a little bit, but it was, I have to say, it was entertaining. And so I'm going to go see this latest one just to see, again, a reimagining that worked because of the classic tributes involved. What about, has anybody else got a reimagined that worked or maybe didn't work and you would have liked to have seen something different?
There's going to be Netflix is okay. Ahead.
What's that, Jeremy? I'm sorry.
I like Pete's Dragon.
Pete's Dragon. Okay.
I actually thought that was decent. Yeah. I did see the new one. I thought that was pretty decent. It was definitely different than the first one.
Yep.
Good call. Good call. Barb, you were saying something as well.
Yeah. Apparently, Netflix is going to do a Conan series.
Excellent.
I've heard that. We'll see. I would be really curious how Conan would go over with today's modern political.
Okay,
you think he's a little too barbarian? It's Conan the Barbarian, though, Aaron. I mean, that's what
the Lamentations of the Women.
Yeah, I've heard that they want to base this really on Robert E. Howard's stories. If they do, because I've read most of them,
I have too.
I don't know how that would fly, especially in this society. He's a little misogynistic or whatever.
Why is it that the art can't be art, even though some people may not?
I think it would be. I would love to see a straight adaptation. I mean, when they talked about a TV series, I said, well, that'd be perfect because almost all of Conan's stories are just short stories.
Yeah.
So a TV format just totally works.
Yeah,
I'm sure they'll update it.
He-Man stuff. I'm not sure Conan would care.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd be curious. I mean, it would. Strangely enough, the original Schwarzenegger Conan actually got his character probably more wrong than people realize. It seems Dean Zachary, like after reading Conan, I'm like, I like the Schwarzenegger movies, but that's not Conan. They really reinvented that character. I mean, he was like a slave, and like no. Conan was never, and then the jet black hair was incredibly important in the book because it made him a foreigner in a foreign land.
Yes,
so I'm like, okay, whatever, whatever. I still like it for what it was.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as strangely enough, the one that was the most accurate to the portrayal of him in the book was the Jason Momoa one. Except the story wasn't like the greatest. But as far as like connecting the character to what he was in the book, I think Jason Momoa hit it the best.
Well, I'm sure Netflix will update it for the current political climate.
The one I'm waiting for to see how it turns out.
The
one I'm waiting for to see how it turns out now is the Cowboy Bebop and One Piece one coming out on Netflix.
Yeah.
Cowboy Bebop. How they do those.
Explain to me the Cowboy Bebop thing because I'm not as well versed in the anime side of things as you guys are.
You know the whole story of the current controversy. Which one?
The story, first of all, give me sort of, in a nutshell, the TV guide sort of version of, tell me what Cowboy Bebop is about.
I guess the general premise is basically a group of bounty hunters and basically a group of bounty hunters. I don't know how to do about spoiling the end of the series.
They're basically cool bounty hunters, like
space bounty hunters.
They're
space
spacefaring. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's much more to it than that. You know, the main character, he has a very interesting past. If I talk about too much, I'm going to spoil something, especially the
So it's a character-driven
at that end.
It is very character-driven.
It's character-driven, but what makes it an over-the-top success with people? Like, what would you say is that connecting formula, that recipe for success that makes?
Well, the soundtrack for one. The soundtrack definitely is the big one.
Okay. Aaron, what makes this such a big hit?
You know, it's funny. I haven't seen the full series yet. It's on my list to watch. I've seen some of it, like 3 or 4 episodes. It didn't connect with me, but I like to watch it again. I think it's one of those things. And I've had that before. I've had series like earlier, they don't connect, and I watch them again. I'm like, oh, this is great. So I don't know. It's one of those things. I've had that happen many a time. As far as the adaptation to the regular series, I think things that start as anime and animation, I think that really goes with the art style. I think once you take the art style out of something, you kind of miss a lot. This was like some of my kind of problem with like Hellboy. I thought the Hellboy movies would good, but Mike Mignola's interpretation, that art style of Hellboy, is really, really kind of important. When you take that out and make it live action,
it's going to be, because if you look at the trailers released, they're skewing very close to a comic booky manga type style.
Yeah,
the live action, it doesn't quite work as well.
It doesn't. There's something lost, and I mean, again, it's like, most people, you still have the anime and the manga. I mean, it's not like you can't go back and enjoy Cowboy Bebop in the original.
My whole viewpoint with this thing where something new ruins the whole thing, that's not true. Like there's a series I'm reading right now. There's a light novel version, a manga version, and anime adaptation. All 3 are wildly different from one another, yet they all exist in the same sphere. You can enjoy one without joining the other 2.
Which series is that?
So I'm a spider now. I'm a spider now. So what?
Oh, okay.
Basically, you read the light novel. There's a certain chronological order you have to read it in, and you get much more introspective on the characters' thoughts. A lot of their internal monologue. The manga cuts majority of that out. It's much more straightforward. You use a lot of the plot twists, a lot of the seeds, but it's much more enjoyable because the illustrations are much more engaging, much more visually interesting. The anime version, though, follows the original book series much closer, but the illustrations, the animation is not very good. So depending on which one you're looking at, each one has a different way of going about it that, one person might like one, not the other.
Let me propose a question to you guys, and this might enlighten those of us who are not as familiar with the anime. If something like Cowboy Bebop was done animated, and it was done, an interpretation of it, let's say 3D animation.
Okay, yeah.
If it was done that way, which costs less than live action, would that be more pleasing, or show? How should I put it?
The problem with that is if you take the general the way animation happens in Japan pipeline, unlike here in the West, animation is done like literally the last minute. You do the voice recording, then they voice record to the animation, not the other way around like they have over here. And as a result, and a lot of changes and editorial stuff being done at the last minute. I know a couple of movies I've seen where they literally handed in the film like a minute before it's supposed to premiere. And the problem that's what happens with the CGI stuff. You start using CGI, there's a pipeline for CGI to be done with, but as a result of the crunch that they have less time to work on it. And also, since they're being underpaid over there, there's less money and resources going to the CGI. So CGI winds up looking much stiffer.
CGI ages more. The hand animation doesn't age as badly as CGI. CGI does. I mean, you look at full CGI movies back compared. I mean, year to year, you see big differences.
I will say they are making progress. Like, I won't say it's perfect. The new Lupin movie does do a decent enough job, I think, converting the characters to CGI. And there's a couple other ones too that have done a pretty decent job as well.
It's strange enough. It's really, and I'd almost say this is almost maybe more an American thing, maybe not. Americans really like to make things look real as possible.
Yeah.
What would it look if it was real? And so, to a lot of, I think, strange enough, to a lot of people over here, you see these executives go like, "Well, we have this anime series that's really popular, but if you're not into the art style, it's not going to sell. But if you make it look real, we can get more viewers in it." Yeah,
look what they did with the movie Your Name. Like you're saying, they're adapting Your Name, a best-selling, a high-grossing movie, and turning into a live-action film set in the U.S.
Yeah, the Kira one. Yeah, the Kira one they want to put in I think it's New York or whatever.
Is that actually out of production hell at the moment?
I don't know. I mean, it's when I heard what they wanted to do with it, I'm just like, oh, whatever. But I mean, it's I don't know. It's almost like I find it really weird, especially in American comic readers. This is why I find really entertaining. That like, why read American comics? I don't read manga. And I was like, yeah, but it's all cartoons. No, but it's no. I don't read manga. And this is more the older generation. Younger generation, I think, go back and forth. Older ones, I know this is And again, because I think a lot of superhero comics approach that sense of realism, still a little bit like look more realistic. Manga stuff is much more iconographic, yes.
Mm-hmm.
In its representation, which sometimes doesn't always work. And so I think, like, if you adapt Batman to the movie, there's not much lost. The artwork in a lot of Batman, its approach is realism, but you adapt anime, which is in this iconic sort of stylization, you do lose something. This is why I think in Japan, a lot of anime is made instead of live action. One, they don't have I know they have a lot of resources to make live action movies in Japan. I would assume it's just real estate living on an island and stuff, but they've always, animation is much cheaper over there than here. But when they animate stuff, they stick pretty close to the art style, but they never try to make it look realistic. They and it's very weird because if you look at manga, like the backgrounds look photorealistic almost compared to American comics, but the characters do not.
Right.
And so I think and I don't know why Americans have this sort of fixation with everything that has to look real, even in video games. Oh, it looks so real.
Same reason we said earlier about accessibility, lowest bar accessibility.
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
I think reading comics. I remember you brought up Mignola earlier.
Yeah.
I liked Mignola doing that style. Now Mignola can do a more realistic style.
Oh, absolutely.
But the fact that he chose to do Hellboy the way he does, and Kelly Jones to a different degree does a similar exaggerated style. And I've always thought, that's cool. It's not particularly my thing, but I like the fact that people do that and that they like it. Todd McFarlane's style was much more cartoonish. But what that does, for me anyway, is it psychologically gives the viewer and the reader the cue that you're supposed to be identifying with concepts and ideas and the story more than, oh wow, look how realistic that looks.
Yeah.
Right.
Hellboy's very much that way. Yes.
Even though I'm in the realism school, I'm still in the stylized version of that realism school. I'll tell you why. Because and this is nothing against these artists because they're fantastic artists, but people like Greg Land and Alex Ross, love them. They're fantastic draftsmen, okay? But they take me out of the fantasy because their stuff is too photo reference real. It's too far. It's so attempting to be real that it feels a little bit stiff, and it takes me out of the fantasy of the realism where, if you take somebody a little more stylized, it's got a reality of its own world. Like John Byrne. We always come back to John Byrne, right? Where it's real, but it's not real. It's real unto itself.
Real unto itself. I think that's a point. And it's funny. Watchmen was one. Like, I think the Watchmen comic worked. I think the exposition, the comic worked because it was a comic book in that style. I think one of the reasons why the movie didn't work, not whether you like the movie or not, is because once you put an owl costume on that dude, I mean, he's sitting there touting like philosophical and high ideas, but I'm like, yeah, but you're wearing an owl costume. It's taking the reality, like when you put superhero costumes in comic books, okay, yeah, that looks cool, but when you make them real sometimes. It's just like, yeah, but this is dork wearing an owl costume, and, and people sometimes can't get by that. They can't look past the fact that what is this guy wearing? And so
remember too, Aaron. I'll interject here. The intent of Watchmen is to deconstruct. Okay, so we're Alan Moore is deconstructing all the expectations of the American superheroes. So it's done intentionally.
I think the comic book works better. I think the movie didn't work as well because I think, and I can understand Alan Moore's like he's using the comic book that deconstruct the comic books. When you add it to a movie, it's a movie deconstructing the comic book. So it's like you're going like 2 steps back with the people watching it, who, like somebody who watched it and doesn't read comic books. Okay, some guy in an owl costume. I don't get it. You read the comic. Oh, I get this. I used to read Silver Age comics or whatever, so I get this. So that, and I think there was a reason when he said that movie can't be translated. I'm like, yeah, I can kind of see that a little bit. I really like Zack Snyder's Watchmen movie, but I can understand most people who've never read comics or whatever watch that and be like, I thought Batman was dorky. This is even like dorky or something. I mean,
we have a comment. Infrafan says, Snyder had no grasp on the context.
It was one of those things that probably should. I remember everybody who saw that movie was like, yeah, there's this blue naked dude. That's like all they remember. That's it. That's it. And it's like, but yeah, and become real in ink. Yeah, I think, and this is why superheroes, I mean, I think movies have gotten better making superhero costumes or whatever. The one thing I've noticed is they have made the costumes incredibly intricate, that they put so many cut lines and so many pieces that I'm just thinking, oh, man, you can't even that. I mean, Spider-Man, whatever. But I did think it was funny in the original Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, he's like designing his costume, and then the next thing you know, you see him like a costume that like I couldn't make that. Like I'm like, look at this thing. Like, did you make this in your house? It's all like molded webbing. I'm just like, what? You know? I'm just like. I'm like, nobody knows I'm Spider-Man except the FX crew down the street who made your costume.
They made this costume. Right,
so I'm just like, is there a press? So that was a little bit of, I mean, it was a minor nitpick and it's a movie, but it is sometimes, Batman seems a little more realistic because he has all the money he could do in his cave. But when you have a guy in an apartment who all of a sudden like has got Hollywood level superhero costume.
Maybe unless you want to go around with an easy Bagman for the whole movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, well, I don't know, man. It'd be kind of cool. Yeah. Especially after. Yeah. So because I think the first attempt was like a stocking cap and like some sweats, and then the next thing he's like,
he's got this like spandex textured.
I'm like
perfect eyes and
They tried to explain it a little more with the second Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield, that it was like supposed to be a wetsuit or like a cycling suit that I'm like, okay, I can kind of see it, but still, I'm like, that's really good craftsmanship to make that and not only be able, and it holds up. I mean, so you know, Superman, they wrote it out. It's an alien costume in a spaceship,
right?
In the newest, okay, we kind of get that. But yeah, there's a few superhero ones where you're just like, I don't really think somebody could do that in real life. But a comic book, you never question it. Movies, once you throw it in the realism, you question that stuff. Yeah,
that's why what's so cool about the comic book world, what's so great about it is real because the person and persons creating it make it real. If you believe in it, your audience will believe in it. It can have, characters with, look at Savage Dragon with a fin on his head, and sure, man. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, sure, whatever.
He goes crazy with the superheroes. I mean, he's got, like, I remember there was nothing against people make up superheroes, but there were some guys that went through art school that would just make superheroes out of like anything. They'd find a cheese shredder. Okay, it's a guy, he shreds cheese or whatever, and they're looking like, and so it's like they'll just take anything,
anything. Right.
The Savage Dragon was this guy. Like, you have a lady named Dart. What does she do? She throws darts. I'm like, okay, you have a boomerang guy and he throws boomerang. And like, he's just like, just grabbing anything and everything. While I'm like, okay, come on, can you put a little more imagination into it? Like, like lady, she has like darts on her. No other weapon. Like if somebody hands her a gun, she's like, don't insult me. I throw darts. I don't, shoot guns. So I always found that.
Infrafan says it's kind of like you have to explain the details or ignore them altogether. Once you start unspooling the questions, people want answers. It's better to just go past it. One thing I love about Tim Burton's interpretation artistically is he doesn't explain why they're, 300-foot statues in Gotham City.
No.
They just are, He doesn't explain why the cop cars look like 1955 with fins on them. They just are, And
Batman is one of the most interesting characters. If you start diving too deep, it really starts unraveling fast with him.
Yeah.
This millionaire billionaire. Like, who else in Gotham will have the money to create all that? It's kind of obvious. The thing where he spent all this money on crime fighting instead of sending it to help people and reform parts of the city. And you get the money from the money. Like, I doubt all the money is clean money that he has.
I always thought it was fun. Even in cartoons, like I watched Batman: The Long Halloween recently, which is they animated that. I read the book years ago and watched that.
Yeah, I saw
and
that.
Even it's a cartoon, so I take it whatever. But the one thing is they keep stressing that Batman is a normal dude, and yet they keep having the guy, especially Catwoman, do inhuman things on the buildings, like jumping across 2-lane freeway. Like he's going from jumps one building and jumps, and apparently crosses 2 freeway lanes of traffic and lands in the other. I mean, you would fall. I mean, you would be in the first lane of traffic. And they showed one where Catwoman was on the skyscraper. She's something he's tried to help her. He's no, and she lets go and she falls. I mean, the movie must have been 15 stories, and she literally comes down, flips, and lands no problem. I'm wait, what? And so there's a few things where I'm okay, if they're real people, we've got to stress some context and believability. That's why Christopher Nolan, when he did the bat wings that were gliders, that makes sense. That was a cool,
Yes.
But I mean, I know it's a cartoon, it's superhero, but there's sometimes where I'm just this guy would be crippled if he was doing
Infrafriend says, I always remember what Donner said about Superman, verisimilitude. Say that 3 times fast, Aaron. I don't need to believe a man can fly. I just need to believe that a man can fly in that universe. It's a good point. It's a good point philosophically. What we're trying to create here are worlds where anything is possible within the context of that world. And I think that's why anime succeeds. I think that's why no matter how exaggerated, caricatured, or cartoonish some anime is, and some American comics are, if they're true to their world, and if they respect that world and don't stray from that world, we resonate with them and stick with them. And that's kind of where I was going with the discussion, was that I think what we need to do as Silverline creators here is make sure that we stay true to the worlds we create and don't try too hard to say, well, hey, what are the kids like today? Let's throw that in there, huh? What are they into? Yeah. Just don't do that. Just do what you think is cool. And there'll be enough people who like it, right, to support you. Yeah. And if they're not, who cares? You're being true to your world, right? You're doing it. It will succeed on a level. Will it be Batman or Superman? Who knows? Will it be X-Men or Spider-Man? Who knows? But what really matters is, it might be Spawn one day.
You're never going to please everybody,
right?
Or you may have the success of Al Ewing, who has done the Immortal Hulk run.
There we go.
Number 50 was amazing.
There you go. So I mean, it's all about do you enjoy what you're doing? I remember I had an agent for a short time back in the 90s, way back in the day, and she asked me one time, because I was stressing out over trying to, Barb, you remember this? You're trying to get the next job while you're about to finish the job you're on, so you can, pay your bills. And I was stressing out, and Sharon goes, "Man, you sound really stressed out. Are you enjoying what you're doing?" I'm like, yeah.
Are you talking about Sharon Cho?
Yeah.
Yeah, she tried to recruit me too.
Yeah. So Sharon's like, Dean, are you having fun doing this? Are you enjoying this? And I thought it was an absurd question at the time because I'm in my early 30s and I'm trying to get this thing going. And I'm like, hey man, I got to pay bills. I got to get my next gig. And she's like, are you enjoying what you're doing? And only now in retrospect, do I understand what she was trying to say was you've got to get all that success stuff out of your head for a little bit. Because if you enjoy what you're doing, that will be infectious. It will show up on the page. It will resonate with people. Have the enthusiasm to do it. Don't just turn it into a crank out job. Because if you turn it into a factory job, then just go work at a factory, right?
You have to get. This is why when people, is my story going to be any good or not, or is it going to resonate? I'm like, if it's your story and if you believe in it, that'll show through the pages. You'll feel that. I mean, Bone as a classic example. I mean, when Bone came out, it came out in a time when that type of comic book was not popular at all. I mean, Pogo came out years, which is what heavy influence on Bone. You know, and so I think, you know, but he just kind of stuck with it, and pretty soon, I mean, now look at him. Bone's like one of the pinnacles of comic book storytelling. So, but he just stuck with that vision, what he'd like to do. So, yeah, and it totally worked.
Yeah. It is very important to stay true. Infrafan says Dwayne McDuffie had that figured out. He used to suggest each comic should have its own continuity, because once you suggest characters live together in that universe, then you out yourself in a box, right? And then he says, and then you get things like Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yeah, what they have to kind of redo. I mean, the shared universe is a cool idea, but I do think you run into problems like the classic Batman versus Superman stuff, even the comics, the movies, or whatever. That's why I always think it's so funny when people always tell me Batman versus Superman was too dark. Of course it was dark. Batman was in it, you dork. What are you going to do? Have him in the light? He's guy prowls the shadows at night. I mean, it's like, of course it's going to be, it had to be some capacity, and it had to be a little bright because Superman's flying around in the sky during the day.
Well, here's the problem is, in the comic they did the whole differentiate between Batman and Superman. But in the movie, it was all dark.
Not all the time. I mean, there were
it was pretty dark. It was pretty much, even in the daylight, it wasn't as bright as it should have been.
I just want to say, I prefer the World's Finest TV movie they did for the animated series.
Good call, Jeremy. The World's Finest idea, I believe Steve Rude illustrated one. Do you remember that one, Jeremy, a while back? And he did a tremendous job of, when he would illustrate Superman, it was always bright and hopeful, and Batman was always in the shadows, crouched. And so he did a bunch of visual cues that were obvious actor blocking cues, but they really did, send the message that each character is supposed to send. The bright, hopeful optimism of Superman, and the more cynical, dark shadow of Batman. So it kind of it's nice to see those two together that way.
If you look at like the first Henry Cavill movie, where he took up the mantle of Superman, they totally grayed down his suit.
Oh yeah, it was dark.
Really bright blue.
Yeah.
And they pulled it down to kind of like a grayish blue slate.
They desaturated it.
Right, and they did that to the whole thing to make it look more Batman-ish, because Batman was making all the money.
Well, yeah, Christopher Nolan was one of the main producers of that series.
Fam says, here's my counter offer. We fight at 6 a.m. or p.m. That way I can have dinner with my mom, Martha, if I win. Martha! Yeah, I thought that was the stupidest resolution to a movie I've ever seen, was like, oh, everything is peachy keen because both of our mother's name is Martha.
I never understood why people miss the context of that scene. Never understood that. It was just supposed to break it. It was supposed to break his psychosis. Batman's mentally ill.
Besties.
But it was just the idea that he was that anything with his parents is just a psychotic break. And so basically when he said that name, it was such an important memory for him. It was so ingrained that any mention of the Martha of his parents just broke that. He was a psychotic. It was a psychotic break, and everybody kept saying, well, they're both names are Martha. I'm like, did you guys just completely miss the context of that scene? I mean, it was really obvious to me. I never got that. I'm like, I mean, I didn't, he couldn't have said it any more clearer. Once he said the name Martha, it just completely broke him out of the moment because it reminded him of the trauma. He's a traumatic character. He's dealing with trauma. So I never got that. What?
How many times in that movie up to that point did that happen?
What do you mean? Like,
how many instances that happened in the movie up to that point?
Of him going through traumatic. Well, look at the dreams he was having. I mean, earlier in that film, he was having a dream visiting his parents' graves. And like the blood comes out and the big demon comes out. I mean, they're saying that he has nightly nightmares of this. I mean, that's Batman's core essence. That's the whole reason he fights crime is because he is so traumatically damaged from what happened to him as a child.
But no one. So anytime he's on the street walking and see how he heard someone say Martha, he'll break down. Is that?
Yeah, literally, that's what you would call the trigger, right? If you want to call triggers, that's the trigger.
Okay, honestly, it was not clear at all because.
Change the last name to Kent. That's true. Yeah.
That would have probably gotten Scott Snyder dragged out into the street.
If you're reacting to dead parents, yeah, sure, but again, no point was the word Martha said to show that connection.
Well, they needed arguably, whether it succeeded or not, what they were trying to do is they needed something to trigger or to break that psychotic focus, the singular focus
that he had.
That Batman was in.
And they used that name.
And they used that common name to break that. Now, whether it worked or not in context, people will argue that until the end of time. But what I thought was odd was that the way he was written in that film, which I enjoyed, I thought Batman is more intelligent than he was portrayed in that movie. Like, I'm not sure he would have gone that far off the deep end with, must kill alien, must stop him, too much of a threat to humanity. It's like, well, okay, yeah, he would, but he would listen. He wouldn't just go into a psychotic rage. I don't.
So you're saying he was?
You could, but I mean,
that's the difference between Batman versus the Return of the Dark Knight Returns, and the whole monologue between Bats and Supes in the book than the movie.
Yes,
because you have the monologue in the book where Supes is trying to kind of plead the case to Batman, and it just falls on deaf ears because he has a point to make.
Yeah,
right. I mean, to me, would he react that way? Well, look how people reacted after 9/11. I mean, we went to war for how long in Afghanistan?
Yeah, right.
So I mean, so saying this guy wouldn't react after this guy pretty much demolishes a city, almost like a 9/11 event. Yeah, I could totally see this guy going.
Possibly, I could see it.
But when the person like Gary looks like, if he just sees the word 9/11 anywhere, then the people actually just break down if they just see 9/11 at any context.
I mean, if you want to know about the personal effect, okay, so I'll tell something personal about me. When I was young, my father died when I was 12. Every time I see anything that has to do with a father or father image, because I did not grow up with a father at all. Yeah, it affects me. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Names, things affect me. That was a major part of my life that was taken away from me. So I could definitely relate to Batman in that context. Absolutely. And say that would happen.
The whole Martha thing did give us one of the best Batman beatdowns in movies that we've seen in a while.
Yes, it did. That fight sequence in the warehouse still is the pinnacle of I think.
I love that. That was the best fight. That was the way I always imagined him fighting. Just an absolute force of nature.
That was fist to face to floor.
Yeah, when he threw that guy, that was it. I mean, I was like, I did think Ben Affleck. I was kind of skeptical, and I think he kind of sold it as Batman. I liked his interpretation of it a lot.
Yeah.
I thought that was good. And he just, I don't know. I mean, you could argue whether or not Batman would kill or not. They actually interviewed Zack Snyder about that. He's like, look, dudes, if you're really doing this in real life,
Batman
people are going to die.
has killed the comics before.
Yeah, and people are going to die if he's doing this in real life. I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember one of the video games, if you run up to a guy in your Batmobile, you can hit him and it shocks him. And I'm sitting there going like, he's not killing him. Really? That would probably kill most people with the cardiac arrest and how many volts of electricity going through your body. I'm It's one of those things, like, I do think Snyder had a little bit of a point. Like, in the comics, he doesn't kill. But I mean, I do think to a point, like, well, yeah, you're gonna have. I mean, when Superman fought Zod, they didn't need to destroy the city. I'm like, well, what do you think is gonna happen if two gods fight in a city? You think they're gonna dodge buildings? No, they're gonna be tearing that thing apart. So yeah.
Well, you brought something up, Aaron, that I thought was hilarious. I don't
Superman killing. That's not. Well, I hope on the Superman movie was. It's literally just a Transformers movie for DC heroes. If you look how the first Transformers movie played out, it's the same, pretty much the same premise and plot points as the Man of Steel movie.
Did you feel? But hang on, Jeremy. Did you feel the same way with the Avengers when they were destroying a city? Right? Well, they're tearing the city apart, and I didn't hear a lot of fan outcry about Hulk, smashing his way through and all these beings coming through the portal.
Kill people. Superman has
because that's what Hulk does.
Batman has killed people before. There's.
Well, what about those aliens that came through the Tesseract portal, and they're coming through and they're destroying everything. They're destroying.
They decimated New York.
Yeah, that's cool. We're not worried about
that. Was the worst. That was the worst war strategy that I have ever seen. Let's invade a world and make your only portal a tiny little chokehold for an entire armada.
Right. Hey, it's a port on the Death Star. It's about 3 meters, right?
I know. I know. I think, strangely enough, I think the reason people didn't cry about as much in Avengers because he cut that tension with the humor.
Yeah,
and they didn't do that.
We talked about that.
Actually, I've got another thing on that too. Remember the old Superman movies with Christopher
Reeves? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The times that he fought somebody equally powered, he got them out away from the city.
Yeah, Zod wasn't going to leave.
Yeah.
That was the point. If you listen to the movie, Zod says, "I will kill every single one of these people." How was he going to... Zod wouldn't have... If Superman would have left the city, Zod would have just decimated.
I think most people thought at that point, that maybe he should have, I think one of the arguments were, why didn't he just fly into him and freaking try to get him as far out of the city as he could?
He did. He threw him into space. I mean, there was a point where he was actually trying to punch him, not through the city, and Zod flew into the city again. And strange, if you watch that little fight scene again, almost all the decimation coming through that city is from Zod, not from Superman.
Yep.
But I think that's kind of where people go with that, is because they remember the old Christopher Reeve movies.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
they're pining for Chris Reeve.
Oh yeah. I mean,
they want Henry to just, they want the Superman to just fly around the Earth and then Zod never attacking. Right?
Let's do a time travel thing. Woohoo!
Zod never attacked out.
Tachyon field. Hey, if we reverse the polarities on the warp engines, we can create a tachyon.
Yeah.
That's Next Generation. Sorry.
Anyway, guys, I think do more Superman stuff in the Christopher Reeve.
Right? I think we reached pretty much the closing of the show. I want to thank you guys for joining in tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion we had on Wednesday, Wham, this evening. Once again, thanking our sponsor, Daytona Beach Comic Book Convention. Please go check out Silverline Comics on the Indiegogo, as well as the other crowdfund. What do we have on Kickstarter? We have it on Indiegogo. We've got the Silverline Christmas Special. Please go check it out. We really
would like to see our Indiegogo go over 500. So we're getting really close. So if you have a chance to go over to Indiegogo, please do so.
Absolutely. Good call, Barb. And on that, we close as we always do, true to the colors, my friends. We always say, Make mine
Silverline.
Silverline. Woohoo! Next time.